I'm Marilyn, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 9 of Real Estate Wealth and Overall Health.
Fantastic. And today we have an amazing family lawyer on, Sasha Faraone from Lighthouse Family Law. And we're going to be discussing some of the things about common law, marriage, cohabitation. So we have an exciting show coming up with her.
We do.
But first, like we do every episode, I guess, we want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market. The market has changed. Every time I feel like every time that we do one of these, there's quite a significant change. Like it's not like it's changing. It's not as flat as it is. So what are you seeing in the market?
Right now we have inventory all over the map, literally. So we are seeing in certain areas, specifically more in Brampton area and Orangeville, things are a little bit slower, where in the city we're getting a little bit more activity, depending on the price point as well, because affordability. So if we have a property that's listed at, a condo that's, let's say, listed at $549, we're tending to get more showings there than we would for a property listed at 1.1. So I think it just, there's more pool of buyers, but we are seeing even still some properties are going into multiples. We had one that we just sold, actually, great location on the borderline of Mississauga, Etobicoke, and that went into a natural bidding war with multiple offers. Our clients were able to secure the property because we had a good relationship with the listing agent, and it was a pretty good smooth transition to be able to acquire the property. So I think depending on what the product is and the location, it always goes back to location. There is still, more buyers than there is, let's say, inventory, or vice versa, where, somewhere like Brampton, where there's just sitting on over 100 available listings right now for what we have for sale, then there's a lot more options. So our showings are not that we're overpriced. We are within the realm of where we should be. You're maybe getting one showing a week or two showings a week come the weekend. So it's a little bit slower, but historically around the holidays, that's what happens.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too. The biggest thing is just look at inventory in your area, because as Marilyn was mentioning, Brampton, let's say, for instance, for a detached property, maybe within a few kilometers of where this house is that we have listed, there's over 400 properties to choose from. And then if you narrow it down to a 3-bedroom, there's 117. So in a situation like that, you have to be buyers in a market like that. It is a buyer's market. And so what you have to do is you have to look and see what your competition is. Even if your house shows better than some of the ones that are listed maybe a little bit less, you may have to be at that price, because right now buyers in a environment like that want choices. They have choices, and they want to get the best for the same prices as something else. So that, and also I'm going to say for Brampton, one thing that they really do want, and understandably, because it's multi-generations, they live, sometimes it's a larger family or they take their parents with them, is they do like that separate entrance where they can put extended family or rent it out, which helps them offset the mortgage. So that's a big thing where ours doesn't have that. So when we went in, we did explain that to them, that a lot of buyers, because we work with buyers as well, that's actually some of the calls that we received. The first question is there a separate entrance? And then once we said, no, unfortunately there isn't, however it can be made, they're not interested. So a lot of people want that turnkey and that option with that, having that separate entrance and possibly an apartment. Yeah, we're also seeing too, I feel with multiples, even in the one where we were in on the buying side, and we went into multiples and we're competing with 2 other offers, and we feel like we still got a steal on the property, even though we're in multiples. So it's not like it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago where things were going hundreds of thousands over. You're basically at the same. You could still get deals even though you're in multiples. So if you're a buyer and you're worried about competing, the thought is that you should just go in with a price that you're willing to pay, with a little bit of room to move on it, and you might still be able to get a house even though there's other people bidding on it, because there's financing, there's a whole bunch of things that come into play. You don't have to worry about it going over asking. Sometimes it does, but there's been numerous times where it might be around the price where it's been listed or under. So you try to get a knowledgeable realtor to help you if you are looking, because it's hard to give, there's no one answer for the market. It's every property can be different. We have one listed at $499 now.
Yes.
It will probably sell this evening.
Multiples tonight.
right?
Yeah.
But they were a little nervous maybe about doing it on an offer date $499, but what that did allow us to do is it allowed us to generate offers. There are 4 or 5 other condos similar to theirs that have been sitting. And those aren't going to maybe move. They're going to have to move on price and stuff. And the more things sell, that's going to change, what the actual market value is, right? So there's a lot of different strategies and a lot of different ways to sell and buy right now. Use a realtor that has some experience and some knowledge that can give you different aspects and options on how to navigate this market, because it is a little bit tricky and challenging. Even for us who've been in the market for 20 years, we've trying to use all our tricks that we know to kind of get through that. So
need a new book of tricks.
Exactly. So we'll see what the spring market brings. I don't think rates are going to change now because it has come down, and I think they might stay steady for a little bit. That's what I've been reading. So I think it's going to be a kind of a flat market for a little bit here. So if you are looking to kind of make a move or do a lateral move or upsize, it's a great time to do stuff. Don't wait around for things to increase, because when your house increases, what you're going to buy is going to increase, and you're probably better off carrying a lower balance.
This is true.
I would say.
Having said that, I'm not sure if you heard the new rumor that Donald Trump announced the idea of a 50-year amortization period.
Yeah. So we were talking about that earlier today. We saw an article on that, and the article that I read said that Canada, wants nothing to do with that. Like, they won't go to 50 years. But I spoke with Marilyn about it, and we kind of did a calculation just to see what the difference would be, right? Because 50-year amortization can be good, right? You're going to bring down your payment, but I use $600,000 as a mortgage amount, right? So for 30-year amortization at 4%, which is kind of where we are right now, the payment would be $2,864, okay?
And change.
Now, if you did a 50-year amortization, if they allowed that, that would go down to $2,314. So maybe about a $550 savings a month, which is kind of big.
It's a lot for a family.
It's a lot, right? But the kicker is that the interest difference, the interest that you're going to pay on a 30-year amortization is about $431,000.
Right.
On the 50-year, it's $788,000. So you have 20 plus years of accrued interest, right? My thing and my belief is that you can take a 10-year amortization, 50, 100 years, right? If you want to pay off your mortgage, they have, prepayments, lump sum, accelerated payments that you can get it down to whatever you want. The fear with this is, yes, people can get in, but you're going to be in a lifelong mortgage. And then it's well, is it better for me to rent? Do I still want to own something? Would I carry a mortgage into, even if I'm not alive, it gets passed on? These are all things that, some countries in Europe have generational mortgages or debt, right? So I think for stimulation, allowing people to get in the market, it's great, but it has to be, people have to understand that you are paying more interest, you're paying for a longer period of time. If you get a mortgage at 20, which most people are buying at maybe 30 or 40, you have a mortgage till 80 or 90. So you're retired and you're still paying a mortgage. That's the way I look at it. How about yourself? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of pros to, a longer period to have a mortgage. Definitely will help a lot more people get into the market. It helps lower the payments, and definitely compared to the 30 years or the, 25 year. I also think that a lot of people don't know, but there are a lot of countries like Japan that already have 50 and even 100 year. So it's not something that's so new and shocking. I just think it will help a lot more people qualify. And there are some people that say, hey, you know what? The property is appreciated. I've owned it for 20 plus years. If I, leave this earth when it's my time, I want to live my life and also enjoy. And if there is, a small debt attached to the property, at least it will still leave, the whoever's going to be getting this property or inheritance with something, right? So I think there's different ways of looking at it. Of course, the interest is a lot more that's accrued, and that's a significant amount that you would have had to pay. But with any mortgage and any debt, there's always going to be, that portion that you would have to pay in interest, right? So I think if it helps people to qualify, because there are a lot of people, their dream is to own something for their family and their children. I think that if it's a product that helps, why not?
Yeah, I agree. I think for people with rental properties, like if you need expenses and stuff, like you bring down your payment so you can, use some of that money, or you can, become cash flow positive, and you can write off a lot more interest. Like that could work.
That too.
There's benefits and there's negatives, but at the end of the day, like you have to understand your mortgage, what you're paying, and you have to, understand financially a bit on how you want to pay down a mortgage and what you're actually doing when they give you a longer amortization. Because at the end of the day, the bank's making more money off of you, right? That's what they want to do, and that's why they allow refinancing and stuff.
Right.
So, either way, I feel like owning a property is good. This would help you to do it, but it would, you're just paying it off a longer time. It comes down to, what type of life you want to kind of live, right?
That's right. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. I don't think it's happening here, but let's see if the states implement that. Quickly, before we get into our guest speaker, I just wanted to go over, we talk about this a lot, but I'm seeing it again because we've had a few conversations now with our clients just about, price adjustments and things like that. And I wanted to, again, talk to you about the importance of pricing a property well. And what happens when it sits too long and when there's a lot of inventory? Why is it important to try to be priced properly when you hit the market the first time?
Good question. When you overprice, it's just going to sit longer, and we have some inventory like that where the showings just fizzle out, so you're not going to get the showings, and if you don't get the showings, then how can we get a potential interested party in an offer, essentially get the property sold? So I think that, when you first launch, you want to make sure the home showcases well, and you do want, like Adriano mentioned earlier, if your average in the area for a 3-bedroom home are selling, let's say $925, we don't want to be listed at 1.1 if we're, again, similar in terms of square footage and, renovations and that sort of thing. You want to be priced maybe at like a 949, somewhere really close to where that target number is, or again, it's just going to sit, right? So buyers have options, and I think that pricing, even if you go just at market value, or even if you want to still try, we are still seeing that where you even slightly price it under and you do like a 48-hour holdback, where again, if it's priced right and it's an area or a product that people want, you will naturally get multiple offers, which is a misconception. People think, oh, if I list it too low, then I'm going to just, give it away, which is understandable. However, if you're putting it too low, a lot of people are going to be attracted to it, and it'll naturally, usually sell where it should.
Yeah.
At market value.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the other thing too that I want to say is, like, a lot of people come to us and say, what about feedback, or what's going on, right? But it's very tough. Like, if you're priced and you're not getting showings, it's hard for us as realtors. Like, we can tell you, but like a lot of times we rely on feedback from other agents, right? If you're not getting showings, we can't even call them and say, hey, what'd you think of the house? Because some might say, hey, it shows very well, price is too high. Or they might say, hey, price is good, we didn't like this, that, and the other. At least we can go with that, right?
Exactly.
And it's tough because even, you do open houses, and if you don't get people through, it's tough for us to even know where to go. And then we basically have to say, okay, if it's not selling after a certain amount of time, unless the house shows very poorly, or it's, maybe in an area or backing onto something that, is causing issues, a train or something, it usually will then, be a price.
A little more challenging.
Yeah, challenging. And you got to remember too, like, if you are selling to make a move, then you have to say, okay, like we mentioned on the last podcast, you might sell 30,000 less, but when you buy, people are trying to make up that 30,000, so they offer 30,000 less, and that's why the market is kind of settling and coming down a bit, because people aren't getting what they wanted for their house, so they're offering less, and that just makes sense. That's the market we're in now, but there's, you can't time a perfect move, I think. So,
no, of course.
You know what? With that being said, we are going to bring in Sasha Faraone,
very excited,
family law, and she's going to have some great tips. So stay tuned.
Hi everyone, we are back and we are very excited. We have a very special guest today. We have Sasha Faraone with Lighthouse Family Law.
And maybe before going into some of the questions we have today, which there are a couple interesting ones, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose maybe family law and what you do.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'll start off by saying that. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you heard, I'm a family lawyer with Lighthouse Family Law. Our office is based in Oakville, but we do have some satellite offices in Toronto, Burlington, etc. I am a family lawyer. So what does that entail? A lot of the work that we do is dealing with people that are going through separations, whether they're common law or married couples. I know we'll touch on some of the differences later on in today's episode. I also do work in terms of the starting stages of relationships. So doing cohabitation agreements and marriage contracts. A lot of people, there's a misconception that we also do wills and estates. Unfortunately, I don't touch on those. That would be a wills and estates lawyer, but that's kind of what family law involves. And so high level, it involves dealing with subject areas involving children, so child support, decision-making and parenting plans, spousal support, which is what they call alimony in the US, and property division. Those are kind of the 5 high-level subject areas. I would consider myself a collaborative lawyer, although I don't have that specific training. So what that means is I prefer to negotiate primarily separation agreements through lawyer-assisted negotiations out of court as opposed to litigation. But every lawyer is different. So some lawyers like trial, and so we would say that they're more litigation-focused, and a lot of the time for them is spent actually in courthouses litigating for clients. But I would say my preference and just my style is more settlement out of court, focused on the lawyer-assisted negotiations and mediation. Yeah, and I've been practicing since 2017.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's great. So before we get into the main questions, you just said something, and I wanted to just get your opinion. Are you finding more and more people are doing like say cohabitation agreements and that kind of stuff? Maybe people are moving in later in life. Are you finding that's like a little more common now than it was maybe even 10 to 20 years? I know you weren't in the business, but maybe from other partners. Like, do you feel like that's something more common?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say yes. The reason being, as you kind of mentioned, people are maybe starting to enter into relationships later in their life. So, I'll refer to my parents who met and then they're in their early 20s, got married at 25 and had kids. They started their marriage with essentially no assets. And so this idea of entering into a cohabitation agreement or a marriage contract didn't necessarily make sense because they were kind of entering with nothing and on an equal playing field. Whereas nowadays, as you mentioned, people are entering into maybe like second or third marriages. People might have kids from a former relationship, or one spouse or one party might have a home, a property, or a business, or has maybe gone through a divorce. And so they understand that they're entering in on an unequal playing field, and so they have some assets that they want to protect. So that's typically, I think, a reason why people might want a cohabitation or marriage contract. Or I've had a number of files, I have a few right now actually, where it's the parents that are kind of pushing because maybe they've gifted a significant amount of money to a child, or they've purchased a property for them, and so the parents are looking to secure their child's interest in a particular property or set of assets.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's a lot of interesting stuff. Now we're going to go into maybe some of the meat and potatoes of what you do. So the first thing we wanted to talk about is, I guess, like living together and stuff. So for instance, if a couple lives together in a house or a condo and they separate, what is the difference in property division between, like, if the couples were married or if they're common law? Is there a difference, and what might be the difference there?
Okay. That's a great question, and I would say it's a common misconception. And even myself, I will say, before becoming a family lawyer, I used to think that the property division treatment was the same, whether you were common law or married. It's the biggest difference. So if a couple is married and they separate, there's going to be an automatic property division. So essentially you calculate each spouse's, we call it net family property. So you're calculating what their net worth was on date of separation, and the spouse that has the higher net worth pays the other spouse 50% of the difference. So just for easy numbers, if one spouse has $100 worth of assets, you take all their assets minus all their debts on date of separation, and you look at what they brought into the marriage. Let's say they're worth $100 and the other spouse is worth $20, then they would pay half the difference. So they would make a payment of $40. 100 minus 20, 80 divided by 2. And that payment of $40 is what we call an equalization payment. And it basically results in both spouses leaving the marriage worth the same net worth.
And that's on the marriage side.
On the marriage side, correct.
And if it was really only $80, there'd probably be a lot less litigation.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, those aren't the real numbers.
So I've had files where one spouse maybe has a business, or they have a sizable pension, or they have multiple rental properties, or significant savings, and so the equalization payment could be next to nothing, and it could be millions of dollars.
Okay.
So that's what happens in marriage when a marriage falls apart. And for common law couples, there's no automatic property division. So this idea of equalization doesn't exist for common law couples. If a common law couple, let's say, has a property, and I think we'll talk about this a little later, but essentially when they separate, it's this idea of what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. So you look at whose name is on the bank account, who owns the pension, who owns the property, so who's the title owner. And if someone is looking to make a claim for property division in the context of a common law relationship, they would have to prove that they've contributed to the property through financial contributions. Like every month they were giving the title owner a certain amount of money, aka contributions to the mortgage, or there was sweat equity. So it's like maybe they didn't financially contribute, but they were helping with renovations, they were helping manage the rental properties. So those cases are really tricky. I have a few of them right now. They're very difficult to prove, especially if historically there's no record keeping. So, a common law couple's been together 20 years, and there were contributions, but banks maybe only keep records for 7 years. So how are you going to figure out how many e-transfers or what payments were made? Or if there's cash payments, that's even harder. So that's where a lot of litigation happens when you have those common law relationships where there's some type of property possibly owned by one person, and they go through a separation, and people just assume, well, I've lived there, I've been contributing, I want 50%. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And this is all, presumably there was no cohabitation or prenup prior to this,
for sure.
these types of issues coming up.
Yeah.
So is there, and then this is before we get into something else, if there was, let's say even a cohabitation agreement or a prenuptial agreement, is there anything that can change that? Like if you're in a relationship that would supersede what you've agreed upon prior, or is that pretty ironclad to sign, like once you sign it, let's say?
So just to clarify, so if people are entering into this relationship, they have, let's say, a cohabitation agreement signed, basically, I guess your question is, could that get set aside at some point?
Yeah, or portions of it. Like could something supersede it if they, felt like, maybe there was something that was proven, or like, is that kind of pretty ironclad what you agree on? Yeah,
it's a good question. So the whole purpose of doing this cohabitation agreement, in this case for common law spouses maybe living together, would be to basically say, well, what is our intention? We're buying this property, or we're living together, and maybe this idea is we don't have a property now, but we're going to be buying a property in the future. So what is the intention? So in the event we separate, how does the property get treated? Is it split 50-50? Is it, well, my name is on title, you're paying me kind of rent as opposed to contributions to the mortgage? So that intention should be documented in the contract. For a cohabitation agreement to be binding, you want to make sure that there's full financial disclosure exchanged before signing, and we call it a financial statement. It's a court form. Basically, you list all of your assets and debts, so both sides know exactly what the other side has coming into this relationship. You want to make sure that both parties have independent legal advice, so it's not one lawyer drafting it and then getting the other side to just sign with the witness. You want to make sure there's full independent legal advice, and you want to make sure that it's really well written. There's no ambiguity, so any judge or any person reading this contract knows exactly, in the event of a breakdown of the relationship, this is how the property gets treated. So if you have all those elements, it should be ironclad.
Should be good.
And that's what you're going to rely on in the event you separate.
Now, going back to your question, one thing that I think would change something, but that's a different section, would be if you had children, right? Because then there's Section 7 expenses, and that's a whole different, I think, section.
But completely separate from property.
Okay.
Right. So even if you have a common law couple living together and they have children together, then the child support piece, which is what you mentioned on, like the table support, child support, and then the Section 7 expenses, that's completely separate. Same with spousal support, separate issue altogether from property. Okay, so spousal support and child support is the same essentially for both common law and married couples separating. The stark difference would be property division.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm sure we could like go back and forth on this for like years. So maybe if people have questions on this, maybe we might have to bring Sasha back on just to talk about this. But moving on here, another thing that, you know, like we sometimes get asked or you know, just we have curiosity on is like, if a married spouse, let's say you receive a gift from parents or an inheritance during, you know, your marriage.
Yeah.
And you use those funds, let's say, to renovate a property. What happens, you know, if it's a marriage and they separate to those funds?
Really good question.
Or what do you?
This happens a lot.
And then maybe
Renovate or use to pay down the mortgage, because we've had cases
or
like
to
that
buy a house too, right? Like that was part of one of the questions, but we can answer it now. And then maybe at the end of that, what is your suggestion on
How to protect this
how to protect that, like from
so
a
let's
family?
say one parent, we have one example where one parent gifted $250. What would your suggestion as their lawyer be to that?
Yeah, so I think practically speaking, a lot of times people take that gift or that inheritance, and the first thing they do is they dump it into paying off the mortgage, which makes sense. The problem is if that married couple separates at some future time, they lose the ability to like deduct or exclude that amount. So when it's a matrimonial home, and the definition is when you're married, and it's the home that you're residing in at the time of separation. And there can be more than one. You can have a cottage property, you can have a home in Aruba. It just has to be ordinarily occupied at the time of separation.
So not only your primary residence, just
Exactly.
Okay.
It can be multiple
Good to know.
residences.
Because you can have multiple primary or
Multiple
matrimonial.
matrimonial homes.
matrimonial. Wow.
And the issue with a matrimonial home is when you get money from an inheritance or a gift, like a third party, and you put it into renovating the home, which again, very common, or you put it into paying down the mortgage, in the event of a separation, those funds don't go back to the individual that received the gift or the inheritance, they get split. So unless there is a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement or some type of contract that says that these funds that are going into this joint asset, this matrimonial home, are going to go back to me in the event of a separation, you lose the ability to either exclude or deduct that amount,
Now,
which a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Now, would that be something that someone would want to challenge? I would assume they would.
You can, but unless, again, there's an agreement, that's just the way it's treated. So matrimonial homes receive special treatments. Like you can't, for example, if you know, I'm married to someone, my name is on title to this property, and we separate, I can't change the locks. I can't tell the person to leave.
To vacate.
Yeah.
Even if they haven't contributed a penny towards any of the carrying costs of the utilities and their name's not on title, it's a matrimonial home, so both parties have the right of possession. So unfortunately,
Now I had a question. If someone, so like let's say a parent, instead of giving the money, they can give it as like a loan, or could they do like a promissory note? Would that then kind of exclude it
you can
if
do
it
that.
becomes like
Again,
a
it has to
loan?
be well documented. I would say I've had cases where the parents sign with their child and with their spouse. But there's questions as to like when it was signed. So like it was signed after the fact. I had a case a few years ago where my client assumed, like she's saying that she never even signed it. It was forged. So it's like, how do you go about proving that? So I think the safest thing again is to have lawyers involved, and just to have something like, again, well documented. Both parties have their own lawyers. You can't have one lawyer drafting it and encouraging both spouses to sign. So especially when it's large sums of money.
So let's say you're buying a house together, and it may become a matrimonial home, but let's say someone's putting in more than the other person, which kind of happens, or gifts, right?
It definitely happens.
Yeah.
Is it your opinion that maybe at that point you do a separate agreement for that house or for whatever, in terms of like how the funds were like put in, or like, is that kind of what you would suggest in something like that?
I think as long as, like, if, again, it goes to intention. So like I always say to people, in the event that you separate, are you okay with it being split 50-50? If your answer is no, that you want some other type of, you know, breakdown, whether it's 70-30 or I want dollar for dollar. Like if I put in 80% and my spouse is going to only put in 20, and I want that 80% back, then I would say you definitely want to do an agreement, because otherwise, especially if you're married, it's going to be 50-50. And as I said, for common law relationships, I find those are the most litigated, because it's it's all about documentary evidence, and sometimes the documentary evidence isn't so crystal clear. So people end up starting court applications even if they don't have a strong case. So the other side's kind of force them to hire a lawyer and go through the process.
Yeah, just to kind of, protect themselves,
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
right? So that's what I would always suggest. If you're entering into something and it's not 50-50, if the contributions aren't going to, as you said, it's not always 50-50,
Yeah.
right? Someone's coming in with more, someone has maybe 100% of the down payment, and then the other party is maybe able to contribute 50% towards the carrying costs. But if you're worried that it's going to be split 50-50 in the future, in the event of a breakdown of the relationship, you definitely want to have some agreement that says, we know this is what the law says, but this is our intention. This is what we want to happen in the event of a separation.
Well, that was, I guess, going to go into our next question is basically at what point, does a property become a matrimonial home? I'm assuming that, like, if you're common law and you buy a home together, could that be considered a matrimonial home, or you have to be married for it to be a matrimonial home?
The answer to your question, yeah, you have to be married. So
Okay.
common law, even if you're together 20, 30, 40 years, your common law, you're not legally married, it never becomes called a matrimonial home.
Okay.
It would just be a family residence. And as I said earlier, the matrimonial home gets special treatment. So doesn't matter who's on title, both parties have the right of possession. If someone comes into the marriage with a property, because that happens a lot too, right? I have a property and I'm getting married to someone. If we separate, unless there's an agreement, your spouse gets 50%, even though you
When is
came
this
in a marriage.
In a marriage,
marriage.
yes. Yeah.
So the second question I had would be, because we do get asked that sometimes, if the partner moves in
Yeah.
and we're not legally married,
Okay, so
what the time frame when they could start to make a legal claim
for common law?
for common law?
Yes. So I think maybe for the CRA, it's like living together a year. I know different government agencies have different definitions. In family law, you have to be living together for 3 years,
3 years.
or you have to have a child together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
Good
pretty
to know.
quick. Now, I guess before we get into another question, most times, I guess, before moving in, the suggestion is always to kind of have these things ironed out and signed before moving in, because everyone, all relationships are nice and happy, warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, exactly.
When things go wrong,
Yeah.
I mean, lawyers tell them what they should get and everything changes, right? So I guess from your professional opinion, maybe before, or let's say you're moving with someone, I guess as soon as possible, or when do you think someone should get into, let's say an agreement, a cohab? Like, could you be living together and then you do it? Do you feel like that ruins a relationship?
So I've had files, like I had a file recently where the couple was together 20 plus years, and they decided to do a marriage contract and still very happily married. But what kind of triggered it was my client's sister was going through a separation, and there was gifts from the family to all the siblings, and that got really complicated. So I think just to make everything clean, they just said, let's put an agreement in place to say, okay, well, any money that was gifted from my parents is going to be protected. So you can do a marriage contract before or during the relationship. But as you kind of indicated, it might be a little easier to negotiate with the other side if it's prior to.
It's prior to.
Right? Or this idea of, okay, before we get married, we need to have this agreement in place. So it does motivate people to get it done. Whereas I find sometimes when it's during the marriage, there's nothing.
There's no motivation,
right?
that just lags, and then everyone's
exactly.
like, oh, that thing, came back up again.
Yeah.
Now it's Christmas.
And you get busy.
Exactly.
Life happens, and then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
what's the saying you always say?
Cheap is expensive.
Cheap is expensive. That's true with realtors and with family law. Probably more so with that. So one of the other questions we're going to talk about was just, with the matrimonial home 50-50, but we've kind of already gone through that. So basically a cohabitation, will it get divided 50-50, or is it whatever you bring in?
It's whatever you
prove that,
negotiate. So the whole point of doing a cohab or marriage contract is to say, we want to do something different in the event of a marriage breakdown, and different in terms of what the law dictates.
Yeah. But let's say someone bought a house, say, hey, they didn't even think about it, we're buying it. One guy buy a house, one guy puts in $100,000, she puts in, the other person puts in, let's say, 50, and they move in, everything's great, then there's a separation, right? Is some of the matrimony, could one spouse ask for 50%, or is it just what you put in? How does that usually work, or is it circumstantial?
So if they had
No, let's say they were just dating
Okay.
and someone decided, hey, let's buy a house. I have X amount of dollars. The other person has X amount. It's not the same amount. They put it in to buy a house. They live together for 2 years and then they decide to split up. Could there be the potential that everything gets split 50-50 if there's no agreement? Or does it become, hey, I put in this, you put in that, that's how we're going to split it?
Different ways to look at it. Like one option could be each person gets back their initial investment dollar for dollar, and then the balance is split 50-50. So let's say in your case, you mentioned one person puts in 100K, one person puts in 50K as a total 150 down payment. And then let's say the mortgage payments, property tax, etc. was all 50-50.
Right.
So maybe that would be a reasonable outcome, is each party, once the house sells or once there's a buyout, each party gets back their original investment dollar for dollar, and then the balance is split 50-50.
Okay.
Right?
Or
Or
even
you can
by the
look at
percentage.
the profit.
Right, or you can look at, the percentage part,
Okay.
right?
So that was a question, but we know with the matrimonial, it's a whole different ball game. So if you're getting married, talk to her maybe
Yeah, give
before
Sasha a call.
give Sasha a call. Here's one just for us too, and just quick, a few scenarios because here. But if someone's going through a separation, how do they end up choosing a realtor? I know, I guess in some ways, if they're amicable, it's like choose someone, right? If they can't agree, how does that process work, or what happens?
Or even if at some cases where they just can't be in the same vicinity. So
How does that work?
there are cases where there are abuse and stuff, so there have to be separated.
Yeah.
So what would the different scenarios look like?
Yeah, so I would say most of the time most people want the house, especially if they're listing it for sale, they want the house to sell for as much as possible. So they're kind of on the same side with that issue. And selecting an agent isn't an issue. When people can't agree, normally I'll have my client maybe recommend 3 agents and the other side has to select, and I have detailed timelines for when certain things need to happen. That way the house actually gets listed.
Sure.
And I've actually had files too where there's 2 agents because there just wasn't an agreement. And they were worried. I think it's more like when there's mistrust of the other side.
We had that this year.
We've had that.
Yeah, which I know a lot of agents don't love to
No,
have
you
2
don't,
agents
no.
working on it, but
I guess it's
whatever
better.
works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, we kind of knew them, but I had another question actually too. Is there ever a point where, I'm assuming there could be situations where someone doesn't want to sell or doesn't want to move, but maybe they have to, right? At what point do lawyers or do you have the ability to kind of not force the sale, but what would happen there if, you're maybe getting offers and sometimes they happen to be good ones, but one side isn't cooperating, how do you kind of work with that, or what can be done to maybe try to get the sale or get one party to move forward?
Another good question. I had a few, I think the last one I did was during COVID, where the other side was just refusing to list the place for sale. So in this case, my client was the one paying for all the carrying costs, utilities, and the other side wasn't willing to contribute anything, which they have an obligation to pay their 50% share. And so we had to bring a motion in court. So it's basically it's called a mini trial, I'll call it, where basically we're asking the judge to sign off on this. And essentially we're saying, can you allow us to move forward with the sale without husband's signature? Because when it's a matrimonial home, in this case they were married, regardless of who is on title, you need spousal consent, as you know.
Right.
And so if we're not getting the spousal consent, or we've had, like you mentioned, a few really good offers, and the agent is saying, these are great offers, you should be jumping at it, and the other side is just dragging their feet, or they're being difficult for whatever reason, then you have to go to court essentially and get a judge to say, this one individual can move forward with the sale, or move forward with renewing a mortgage or accepting an offer, and the other person's consent is dispensed with. So unfortunately it does happen.
It does.
I've had it happen on several files. And just even the cost of litigation, but then you end up getting usually the costs of the litigation paid by the other side because you're the successful party. So
but I've seen that a few
unfortunate,
years.
but it happens.
Yeah, but I've seen that even a few years ago where the market was really high and then it started, people had to go to court and then they listed 4 or 5 months later and then the market really significantly changed and it's too bad. coming from me, and I'm sure you'd say the same thing, if you're going through a separation, whatever, if you can work it out and at least be amicable on the sale part of it, just to push it forward, like that would help, I guess, with everybody, your job, my job, all of our jobs here. That's kind of all the questions. Do you have anything, maybe any tips or a few things, like if someone maybe is getting into a new relationship or if someone's getting married, maybe a few things just to tell the people listening on maybe what to do or things to consider before doing that, or what might protect them if they're expecting to get an inheritance or help from family, maybe a quick few minutes on that.
Or if one partner has, let's say, like we were saying, significant amount more and the other one, what would your suggestions be for?
So I guess it depends on if you're the person that has more or less.
Yeah, I guess if you're working for the person with less, it's going to be a different.
No, but I think like anything, before you kind of choose a path, whether it's getting married or purchasing a property together, I think it's really important. I always tell people you need to in order to make a good decision, you need to have all the facts, right? You need to understand what your obligations are, what your rights are, what you're potentially giving away. If you don't sign an agreement. So I think, especially if you're entering into a marriage and it's, like I said, it's not a level playing field in terms of maybe the income, like there's an income disparity, or one spouse has a lot higher of a net worth than yourself, or you've maybe gone through a separation before, and so you know what the risks are. I think it's just helpful to know what your options are, and potentially either doing a cohabitation agreement or doing a marriage contract just to protect yourself. And if, like I said, if you're not okay with that 50-50 division, or you're not okay with potentially giving away some of your assets in the event of a separation, like if you're okay with what the law dictates in that case, then I don't think you need to do anything. But if you're not okay with how the law treats the breakdown of a relationship, then it would be helpful to have either some type of contract.
Right. Now, there must be cases where they, let's say, were married for 15 years, and at the time, like you mentioned, a lot of, earlier marriages, they grow their assets together.
Right.
But then let's say the wife, or just saying, was, taking care of the kids, and that was her responsibility and role, and everyone agreed on that. But then, the male had a very successful business and there was no contract. There must still be a way that I understand you're saying it's 50-50, but there must be people that litigate that. Because all of a sudden, maybe one party, they stayed home, and then the other one, whether it was male or female, and they started to work, and then their kind of side blew up. There must be, I can't imagine the person that's, started to be so successful would be always just okay with 50-50, especially if there was maybe infidelity involved on the other side, just because we see all kinds of things, right?
Sure. So you're kind of tapping into a whole other subject of spousal support.
Okay.
So this idea of whether you're married or not, this idea of, like, I'll say traditionally, mother maybe has a potential career and then gives up that career to stay home and take care of the kids for X number of years, and then the couple separates, and then depending on how long it's been, good luck to that individual getting back into the workforce. So in that case, there could be an entitlement to spousal support. So that's a whole separate issue besides, property division and child support. But in that case, I think there would be an entitlement. And then if the person can establish that you do have an entitlement to spousal support, then you figure out what is the quantum. So how much support are they going to get and for what duration? So completely separate from property, and it would be in addition to.
I don't think we have enough time on this podcast for this, but we can definitely have her back to get into that. But let's say someone needs some law advice, family law advice. How can they reach out to you? We'll have a link below with your information, but if you want to say, do you want to say, like, what's the best way to reach out?
Sure, they can shoot me an email. So my email is Sasha, SASHA, @lighthousefamilylaw.ca. You can send me an email, and I'm happy to have a chat about your particular circumstances and figure out next best steps.
And I have worked with her on a file. That's how we met. So she is great. So definitely reach out to her if you have any family law questions. So Sasha, thank you.
Thank you for being here and all this valuable information.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, welcome back. Like, that was amazing. Sasha had
really
a lot of great insight on things. Some I thought I knew, and some I didn't know, and some things she clarified. So that's great. So if you need any family law, please reach out to her. And now in our final segment, it's always what are we doing to stay healthy? We're going into the holiday season, so I don't know how healthy people can be with all the food and stuff that's going on, but what are you doing this holiday season to kind of stay healthy?
A lot on getting together with family and friends. Of course, we have our big holiday event that we host every year coming up as well. We also have within the community some people that do some charity work outside of the charity organization that we do, that we're helping out with, of course. So that's going to continue, as well as I'm pretty simple, a little boring. I just do my regular yoga 3 times a week, and I do Pilates classes. I do a lot of walking with, my puppy. So she's getting bigger now. She's going to be 9 months. She just went to the groomer today. So
that's a story for another day.
Yes, and it'll be her first Christmas. So very excited about that. And
that's great.
Yeah, just basically a lot of time with family and friends, and we're still business as usual. So that'll be these upcoming weeks.
Yeah, awesome. I think I'm going to try to get out. I like skating outdoors, so I think once the outdoor rinks get cold enough, that's always nice in the wintertime. Maybe we can even try another appreciation event or some kind of skate where there's no snowstorm. So we're going to maybe try that.
Yeah.
But walking outside on a crisp day is nice. Working out, same kind of thing. So lots to be thankful for.
Definitely hit the Christmas market, Distillery District. That's like an annual thing.
Walking around there, and maybe running for an extra cookie here and there will keep me in shape closer to Christmas. So we'll definitely do that. But that's it for our episode today.
Happy holidays.
So
stay
happy
safe,
holidays.
all the best.
Yes. And if you have any questions about this episode, please feel free to reach out. We are on Instagram at Real Estate Wealth and Overall Health. We are on Spotify and we're also on YouTube. So check us out there. So until next time, take care of your real estate, your wealth, and your overall health.
And happy holidays.